Okay, here I'm just going to show the XML that we generate, just going to show it validating. So I'm here in the class DDT that was agreed, generated this off the class XML, which was in the other half of the document that we agreed upon that particular day and has been updated a few times since. So I'm going to try to validate this XML here, which is the output from what I have done ourselves. So we take the doc type tag, copy, paste it into the XML. Validate, and it's working. You can follow the same type of thing for the other. That just there is the class XML that the DTD was based on. So it's medications, everything that we agreed on. So if we want to do the same for, this is Mark's group. Not sure if this is working out. So take it across, just put it in. I think I already had it in. I'm going to try to validate this. It gives me errors. So I'm not sure if that means that there's an error somewhere in the XML they gave us or what, but that was the process that we went through to try and validate our own and then validate what was coming into us. So this is all kind of part of the process yesterday where, you know, these things weren't really working that well and we all had to try and agree on different things. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to basically more detail about what I did in this project. At the very start, I took your example of the write XML code from one of the classes that you did, and as I said earlier on in the code demonstration, that the idea was basically that if you could read from a database and send it to the console, then you should be able to read from a database and send it to a file XML. So I took your example, got that working, tried to understand it as best I could, and then tried to apply that to our code. So I started off with the search method in our database, the search patient method, which was the basis for what I was trying to do. Basically, it was a case of trial and error for that, you know, original method, I suppose. It was a case of, particularly for the writer object that was coming in, it was a case of, you know, experimentation with, you know, the while loops and where you put the while loops. I was getting a situation where it was printing out the XML, but it might be printing out the same person multiple times, and then I tried for loops and I tried ifs and I tried while loops. I tried a little bit of everything, and eventually I got a structure that I was quite happy with, which I think was what I sent you originally. The only issue I had with that was that it was ignoring the first person that we had in our database, but it was printing every other patient that we might have in our database. And so that was really the original write methods. So after we concluded that, and I was happy enough that we made a start, and we decided, though, based on your advice, that putting it into an array list would be a better way of going about it, possibly for ca2, see what's coming down the road. So we decided that I would go off and try and get it into an array list. The array list implementation was going to involve a little bit of object oriented programming, as we had done already for Tony. So based on that idea, we'd done something with a student in the HDIP class. So we took that idea and created a new class called patient. And the idea was that we would fill the array list with new objects of patient, as similar to what we did for Tony. So fairly early on, we were close enough to a solution with the array list. I think I had sent you an email with a query. I was getting a situation where the array list that I was printing nothing, only default values. I think I sent that query to you over an email, but I figured out myself. I had set up the setters in the patient's class method. I'd set them wrong. I'd set the parameter to the attribute, or to the variable, instead of setting the variable to the parameter, and that solved that particular problem. So I was able to see what I had in my array list. That delayed me probably 2 or 3 days, because I was going around in circles not getting the output that I was expecting to get, and that was one problem that we came across. So once it solved the problem of how to actually get into the array list, the next step was to use that array list and put it into the write XML method. So I had a little bit of work to do on the type that we were returning. I wasn't sure that you could return an array list type, or it's called list in the program. I didn't know you could do that the same as you could return a string or a double or whatever it be, so that took a little bit of time to figure that out. When I got that working, the next thing I was probably doing wrong was I was putting in the array list that I was taking in, and what ended up happening was I was printing the names in our database. Everything was printing twice, so I'd print 4 patients instead of getting 4, I was getting 8. So that was the next big problem that I had in terms of the array list and going to the XML. There was also the usual problem with file names and path names. Worked it out in NetBeans about going over here to projects and clicking properties and going down into the source paths and whatever be. That was another problem that we were having with, even in the first iteration. That was one of the early problems as to where the path was. So in around that point we were able to produce an XML document. The next thing was matching it to what was specified in the DTD. So we matched up all the names, all the structure was best they could. At this point we weren't really sure what the structure was. We later realised that the structure of the DTD had to be reflected in the XML output. But at that point there was a couple, I had shared this code with the rest of the group, and there was a couple of different versions of XML outputs going around. The way that we structured it in the original was that you would have a patient's route, then a patient, and inside the patient there would be appointments, medications if they had them, stuff like that. Whereas there was another version, I think the original version of my XML just had a patient's route, a patient, and had all the information inside patient without any distinction between, say, appointment and healthcare professional. So there was a little bit of to and fro on that issue, so we weren't really sure which one to go with. So again, to expand on that theme, the validation of the XML at that point, there was lots of confusion, I think, in the class as a whole as to exactly how you validate it. I think originally our group and anyone we talked to seemed to think that the validation process was just kind of a manual, that the DTD document was kind of a guiding principle document. But I had a suspicion all along that there had to be, kind of a computerized way of making sure that your document was checking up against others. I just didn't really know. I knew from your example that you had to generate DTT and then put the doc type thing across, but I couldn't make the distinction of how we did that for the document that we produced as a class, and how you validated your XML against that. That was really only something that we found out in the last day or two, about putting it all together, generating the DTD from the XML that the class did, and then using that DTD to go into the XML that you want to validate. So the validation at that point, I think, nearly on a class basis, was very much with the eye, and was very much making sure we had the right names and things like that. That seemed to be the concentration at that point. So there was a little bit of confusion, I think, all around until we really got, it was late enough, I think. Most of the groups, we only shared information in the last 2 days or so, so this wasn't really an issue that presented itself very early in the project. So then moving on into the read side of it, I mean, the big problem for me was that Elvira was doing most of the work there, as we had divided up earlier in the project. We divided the 4 things into 2, myself and Mairead, and Elvira and Miles. So we were kind of coming back at each other then with the read stuff towards the end of, from Thursday say on, and she had a little bit done. We were getting a little bit hard to integrate the whole thing in together. So my computer actually broke my screen on Friday night. I think I tipped it with the back of my boot, so I wasn't able to do anything on Saturday. I was lucky I got working then, got a guy to do it for me in Nav, and so I got back in the game on Sunday, and she had a couple of good methods done. So again, I had lots and lots of problems trying to integrate her code into mine, because I was getting errors. It was reading one XML file, and then when you went to read someone else's, it wasn't doing that. So we had lots of problems there. Your email in the heat of the hunt was very, very helpful, because even up to Tuesday night, I'd more or less given up on being able to run the thing off Elvira's computer, because she had the read methods seemed to be working for her, she said, but she had a slightly different version of my she didn't have my array list structure in the right method, so we were going to go for a compromise if she had more stuff running than I had. But using what you said about the default values and putting them outside the switch worked for me, so we got that running. The other issue, which I've probably mentioned, was towards the end when we did start sharing information among the group. There was lots and lots of different discussion. Mark's group made a request for us to change our XML because the structure wasn't quite right. Then there was a request going around for empty tags to be put in, because I think Elvira was getting her code to run on the basis of empty tags being into the XML. It was just playing around with the XML at that point. So I did that. Then we decided, I think you had emailed the other group to say that the DTD rules there shouldn't be a need for empty tags, so that was reworked again. And I think in the heel of the hunt it was probably beneficial work, because the validation of the whole thing wasn't something we'd spent a whole pile of time. We were just happy to have an XML output, and I don't think we would have spent half as much time if we didn't know that the DTD thing had to be an exact guideline for what was in your XML. We didn't really understand the importance of that. I think early on in the project, it was only really in the last couple of days that hit home. From the point of view of interpretability and how XML can help with all this, I think the more you know about it, I think the easier it is and the more useful it is. But I would have found things like, I think human error, like the first document said that Anthony sent us, they had misspelt, I think, phone. I think in the XML that I output the first time, I think I had a capital C for in the middle of healthcare professional, where it was a small C. Little things like that can be very easily missed when it's a big long document, no matter how careful you are. I found that working with Mairead on, I think it was Monday, when she was sitting beside me, just it was Tuesday, calling out all these things to me, and I was typing, and she was, this is, you're after putting in a big S there where it should have been small. Found that sort of stuff very helpful, because doing it on your own and bringing up different screens was quite annoying and quite time consuming. So I think that was an issue. That you have a certain amount of human error in the thing, and you're going to make mistakes no matter how careful you are. And it's the same in the DTD document itself. The original document, we all agreed to share what we could share, but there was, I think, 7 or 8 different iterations of that document, and a lot of it was down to, I remember one day I was looking at what you had done, and you had brackets in the likes of this thing here with PC data. The guys hadn't got brackets there, they were leaving the brackets out, they had no brackets, just had PC data. That was causing it, not to compile at that particular time. There was also, lots of other issues around the commas or the bars that separate the two. So there was lots of different issues like that over the course of the DTD, and the DTD kind of sat for a while. I think we agreed on one at the end when they were happy that had validated. We kind of agreed we'd leave it alone, go away and do the code. But when we came back to it, all these issues came up again, and this was reiterated a couple of times on the Tuesday. So our involvement really in the DTD was, we all did it as a class, and then Kira and a couple of the guards really took control of it in terms of who was driving the computer. But we all kind of pitched in a little bit on certain things like that. If you happen to be in the same rooms and they were working away, and I was in it a couple of times, and we were just looking at different examples, and everyone kind of went back and did a bit of reading. We started off with a very limited knowledge, and we ended up with maybe a little bit more knowledge. Not, I don't think a massive amount more, but there was a certain amount of group share, and particularly in the last 2 days we had to work very much as together, to try and coordinate what was going on, because there was an awful lot going on in the last couple of days. I think, just to sum up, as regards to usefulness of XML or the problems, as we said, the problems probably were lack of experience, and I think human error is certainly a problem. But I think it's a difficult undertaking, getting 3 pieces of, even from 3 projects that were relatively similar, getting data to match up. Everyone has different ideas, different names, different structures, even within the 3 databases, Sives could be talking about junction tables and all that sort of stuff. So there seems to be lots of different ways to do things. I think it's good that you have something that allows you to do that, and I mean, we can see the basic benefits of it. We can, we have an extra few people in our database, and we can share some extra data, and the methods that we done in CA1, like the 1 to 6, they work, for data coming in from other people. But I think there's also issues with it, particularly in terms of trying to work between, say, different groups. You know, it's not too bad in college, but in different organisations, I can imagine it might be problematic to get people to agree on everything. But I think overall it was a fairly good experience.